Good morning and welcome to the teleconference for May 6th, 2021, the Library's Facilities Financing Authority, LFFA board meeting, and the Library Joint Powers Authority board meeting, LJPA, will run back to back. To join this webinar using a telephone only, please dial any of the following numbers. I'll read two of them aloud. 1-888-788-0099 or 1-833-548-0282, and then slowly enter the webinar ID of 997-4378-1414. As an attendee, your microphone is muted for the entire presentation unless you follow the process for public comments. You do not need a microphone, camera, or a screen if you only want to listen to this meeting, as it is accessible by landline or mobile phone. If you need assistance, please call the library's telephone information line at 1-831-427-7713. The board will take public comments as outlined in the posted agenda and in the next slides. All comments must include the agenda item number and be received prior to the close of public comment on that agenda item. If you're joining by computer, you may use the Q&A feature to type your comments. On the attendee control bar near the bottom of the screen, you'll see the Q&A icon. You may also use the raise hand icon to raise your hand. The moderator will either call your name or announce the last 3 digits of your phone number when it is your turn. State your name, and then you will have 3 minutes of speaking time. So in the lower left corner, you'll see audio settings or microphone. And then in the middle, you'll see the raise hand icon and the Q&A icon. And then in the lower right corner, you'll see leave in a red rectangle. If you're joining using a mobile device, the Q&A icon and the raise hand icons likely appear near the top right corner of the screen. So everything's in reverse. In the upper left corner, you'll see leave meeting in red letters, and then raise hand and Q&A in the upper right. If you've called into this meeting using a telephone only, you may raise your hand by pressing *9 on your keypad. The moderator will announce the last 3 digits of your phone number when it's your turn to comment. Press *6 to unmute. You will have 3 minutes of speaking time. Once the board meeting begins, if you're joining by computer, to see all the panelists, you may need to use the Zoom control bar and select Gallery View. Depending on the size of your mobile device screen, you may need to scroll over to view whoever is speaking. And then finally, if you're accessing this meeting via a Chromebook or the web browser only, you may not see all the panelists at one time, only the panelists speaking. The chair of the board, Martine Bernal, will now call the meeting to order. We're transitioning to Gallery View. Please stand by.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. So I'd like to call to order the May 6th Santa Cruz Library's Facilities Financing Authority meeting. May we have a roll call, please?
Director Jamie Goldstein.
Here.
Director Nicole Coburn, alternate for Carlos Palacios.
Here.
Vice Chair Tina Friend.
Here.
Chair Martine Bernal.
Here. Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is additional materials. Do we have any additional materials?
We do not.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is additions and deletions to the agenda. I don't believe we have any.
There are none.
Thank you. Next is oral communications. This is the opportunity for members of the public to communicate to the board regarding items that are not on the agenda, but the subject of the authorities. Do we have any members of the public or others that like to speak under oral communications?
Chair Bernal, there are no public comments.
Thank you. Next is the executive director report, which is item 5.
Welcome, board members. It's been a busy time period with many, with much happening in terms of our projects. The Aptos Design Committee really has concluded their work. There's still many things to be done in terms of interior choices, but the Aptos project will go in front of the county board in May, with construction to begin in the summer. Boulder Creek's moving more quickly than we anticipated. We should have it open by September. I included pictures of Branciforte and Garfield Park. The branches are now empty, and it's something to behold these actually really beautiful buildings in their empty state. Construction has begun. Capitola is well on track for a June 12th grand opening. It's going to be part digital, part in person. I went there this week. I know Jamie's been. It's nothing short of absolutely beautiful and inspiring when you're inside. I think the public's really going to receive it well. We did some preliminary donor events, and I think it was well received by them. We're very, 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 very excited about the opening. Downtown has 2 RFPs out right now, looking for a building housing partner and a master architect for the multi-use project. La Selva Beach, opened to much applause. Again, everything's going really well there. Live Oak is also going to the county board in May, so we'll start construction this fall. The annex is going to the county board in May, so we'll start construction this fall. In Scotts Valley's had several projects that have now been sort of unified, and we are going to have to probably close a month earlier than we thought, around August 1st. But what is great is that we'll be able to put those projects together and disrupt public services the least amount as possible. So we're really excited about that as well. Lots happening, breathtaking amounts.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that is exciting to see all the progress that's going on all over the county, which is really great. And it's good timing, I think, also with respect to things opening up, and so it's all working out really, really great. Thank you. Are there any members of the public that like to speak, or any questions for Susan from board members on this item? No? Are there any members of the public that like to comment on item 5, executive director report?
Chair Brunel, there are no public comments.
Okay, there's no action on that item, so move on to the next item. And this is an opportunity for members of the board to provide additional comments on projects, project updates. Are there any comments from any of the board members?
Jamie, you have to brag for a moment. You've worked so hard.
Okay, Jamie, you're being asked to say something.
Okay, I got it. Sorry, I was having trouble unmuting. Yes, I mean, thank you, Susan, for the acknowledgement about that library and all the effort. It's been so long that the city of Capitola has worked to get a library like this, and it's really kind of amazing to see it come to fruition. Susan made a reference to the donor event that we did. We scheduled a donor event a couple of weeks ago, which was set up so that it was every 10 minutes, a different group would come and they got an individual tour through the facility. We had little goodie bags for them, and everyone was so excited. I think there was one moment where one family came through, and I didn't realize this. I was giving the tour to this family, and it included 3 generations, grandparents, parents, and then the younger children who were about 12, 13 years old. And they get to the room where they were donating, and I didn't know that this was their room. I just said, this is one of my favorite spaces in the library. I love it. And the girls' faces light up because the name of the space was named after them by their grandparents, and they didn't know until they got there. So it was really some pretty wonderful moments, and I really am proud of our entire community and all the help that Susan's been able to give us, because it's going to be a really amazing facility. So can't wait until we can host a meeting there.
Great. Thanks for that update, Jamie. Anyone else like to provide comments? No? Okay. Thank you. We'll move on to the next item, which is a consent calendar. Is there anyone on the board who'd like to pull an item from the consent calendar? Okay. Is there any member of the public who'd like to comment or pull an item on the consent calendar?
Chair Brunel, there are no public requests to pull an item from the consent calendar.
Great, thank you. Okay, with that, we'll take up a motion.
I'll move consent.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Oh,
Aye.
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 Does she need to do a roll call?
Yeah, that's right. I forgot we got to do the roll calls. Okay, may I have a roll call?
Sure. Director Coburn,
Yes.
Director Goldstein,
Aye.
Vice Chair Friend,
Aye.
Chair Bernal.
Aye. So that passes unanimously. Thank you. We move on to item 8, which is general business. We have 2 items. Item A, which is the proposed budget for fiscal year 21-22. Do we have a report, Susan?
We have the wonderful Edith Driscoll, our treasurer controller for the LFFA here.
Good morning.
Morning.
The item before your board is the annual proposed budget. We'll be coming back at the next meeting with the final budget, including any modifications and any recommendations from your board. The basic discussion, as we have each year, is the attached proposed budget reflects the anticipated sources and uses of the LFFA funds. The budgets include a separate budget for bond proceeds, special tax receipts, and the allocation of investment earnings that were earned on bond proceeds while they're being held at Bank of New York. I recommend that you accept the proposed budget, again, including any adjustments we discover this next month. It will include the general fund proposed budget, debt service budget, and I recommend placing the approval of the final budgets on the June 2021 agenda. And I'm available if there's any questions.
Okay. Thank you, Edith. Any questions from board members?
I have one question. So Edith, I remember at one point we had lower amounts for each one of the jurisdictions, and we determined that there was more capacity within the LFFA. And so we processed a JPA amendment where we all got 10% more.
Correct. Well, a
Is there-
percentage. Mhm.
Yeah. Is there potentially more headroom down the road in the LFFA, or have we reached the cap that was in the ballot measure? And if you don't know now,
For example, to explain a little bit more about what you're saying, if you look on page 11, the city of Capitola currently has a maximum of 10 million, whereas in the first JPA agreement, you had a maximum of 8 million. So that's the adjustment that he's referring to, looking at Capitola as my example. 77.5 is where we are now. I will verify and report back at the next meeting. I don't want to speak without looking at it. I don't anticipate so, but I will review it.
okay.
Yeah, that's definitely worth looking at. Thanks, Jamie. Any other questions for Edith? Okay, with that, we'll see if there's any members of the public that'd like to comment on this item.
Chair Bernal, there are no public comments.
Okay, let's see. Then with that, is there a motion to approve the board? I'm sorry, to accept the proposal for Libraries Facilities Financing Authority budgets, including the general fund proposed budget and the debt service fund proposed budget, and recommend placing the approval of the final budget on June 2021 LFFA agenda?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion in 2 seconds, which is better than 1, I guess. All right, all those, okay, no, may I have a roll call vote, please?
Director Coburn,
Yes.
Director Goldstein,
Aye.
Vice Chair Friend,
Aye.
Chair Bernal.
Yes. Okay, so that is approved unanimously. We'll move on to item 8B, which is the special tax bond quarterly financial reports as of March 31st, 2021. And I guess Edith.
Good morning again. The item before your board is the special tax quarterly financial report. I feel that it's important that your board is aware of where the money is, how quickly the money is being spent and where it's sitting. And so we have provided this, my office has provided this to your board almost every quarter. The last quarter, we weren't able to do so. And so this report is really the reflection of the last 2 quarters. You'll see in here that we discuss what funds have been drawn down and what funds are remaining. We have 2 bonds that we're reporting on, the 2017 bond, and then separately we report on a 2020 bond. And I do just want to draw your attention that as of March 31st, we tie out to our bank account at 17 million. But I want to draw your attention, as I do in the report, that we do still have funds on our 2017 bond that needs to be drawn down. We are beyond the IRS limit of how long it can take to spend those funds. And that's my report, if there's any questions.
Right, and I'll just comment if I can, Chair, and thank you, Edith. The reference, I think, was to Scott Valley, looking like there's a balance there. So I think that we actually have a transition or a transaction that crossed a little bit, because we did tender a drawdown request on March 26th for $394,145.67. And I see the report was run on March 31st, so I'm sure it's just in transition.
Perfect.
So I am always very grateful for Edith and Susan alerting and making sure that we're staying on track. And I'm very happy that Scott Valley is making great progress. So we have nearly drawn down all of our 2017 series. And this year, we're going to be spending it all. So we are in, Susan kind of gave you an update. We are in the right now plan review, and we're about to go to bid on the construction, and it is going to be the big construction starting in August, wrapping up in hopefully January. So there will be no issue meeting those obligations. So just wanted to reassure the treasurer and the board that we're working on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Edith from board members or the comments? Looks like we have a small amount too that we'll have to draw down.
Yeah, again, the IRS looks at materiality.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Okay, are there any members of the public that like to comment on this item?
Chair Bernal, there are no public comments.
Okay, so with that, I'll take a motion.
I'll move that we accept and file the financial statements of the Community Facilities District number 2016-1 as of March 31st, 2021.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Coburn,
Aye.
Director Goldstein,
Aye.
Vice Chair Friend,
Aye.
Chair Bernal.
Aye. Okay, that passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, that takes us to item 9, which is just the schedule of upcoming meetings, which are listed on the agenda. Next is June 3rd at 5 p.m. And if there aren't any questions regarding meetings or comments, we'll adjourn. Okay, I'd like to now call to order the Santa Cruz City County Libraries Joint Powers Authority Board regular meeting, Thursday, May 6th. May we have a roll call, please?
Director Coburn,
Here.
Director Goldstein,
Here.
Vice Chair Friend,
Here.
Chair Bernal.
Here. Thank you. Next on the agenda is additional materials. I don't think we have any, but
There are none.
okay, thank you. Next is additions and deletions to agenda. We have a report out from closed session of March 4th, 2021.
There are none.
Sorry. Okay. Next is oral communication. This is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to the board on items that are not on the agenda, but are within the purview or business of the board. Are there any members of the public that like to speak on oral communications?
Chair Bernal, there are no public requests to speak on the item of oral communications.
Okay, thank you. Next is a report by library director.
I've submitted you a report in writing. I have nothing additional to offer.
Okay, are there any questions, excuse me, from board members regarding the report by library director?
have one comment, Chair Bernal. That is, I appreciated the director's report. I think it's always a very interesting insight into more than just the numbers and the budgets that we focus a lot on at the board level, but to hear about it. And in particular, I thought the discussion around the Dr. Seuss issue was very interesting, because I know that was an issue kind of writ large across the country, and to hear, and I know there was a lot of thoughtful discussion. So I appreciated just outlining the rationale on that. And thank you to you and your staff and all the librarians that were a part of that discussion.
I do also just want to add, several years ago, you suggested that we bring more of the discussion around community standards to the Library Advisory Commission. And we've been doing that, and I think it's really enriching our experience. So.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Board members? Are there members of the public that like to comment on item 5?
Chair Bernal, there are no public comments.
Okay, with that, we can move on to the next item, which is report by Friends of the Santa Cruz Public Libraries.
We
Chair
have,
Bernal, hold on just a moment. We need
have
to.
Bruce Cotter here.
Okay.
And Bruce, you're coming over.
All right. Welcome, Bruce. Thanks for being here. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you. It just took me a second to get unmuted and then blacked out here. Members of the board, thank you for having me. My name is Bruce Cotter. I am the executive director of the Friends of the Santa Cruz Public Libraries. Prior to taking this position, I served on the Library Advisory Commission, and I also served on the board of the Friends of the Library. As Susan has noted in her earlier comments, this is a very exciting period for the libraries in Santa Cruz. We are delighted to see that several branches will be opening soon with modified browsing, and with the completion of the renovations at La Selva Beach and the projected opening later this year at facilities in Capitola and in Boulder Creek, we really feel as though we're starting to see the promise of Measure S be fulfilled. We have been quite active as an organization. We have added several new board members. Briefly, they are Robin Holland, a marketing and brand management specialist who resides in Santa Cruz. Laura Albrecht, a graduate student in library sciences who's from Capitola. Mark Winquist, a businessman from Scotts Valley. And Deborah Pronto, who was a founding member of the Aptos Friends. We have also said goodbye to members Landreth, Laura Landreth, and Ginny Morris, who are leaving our board but will remain active at their local chapters. Our board member and former librarian, Janice O'Driscoll, has become the new vice president, replacing me actually, and former director and former executive director, Martin Gomez, is returning to a position on the board. Other things that have happened over the last month or so, we released to the county $593,000 in funds that we were holding from the Betty Leonard estate. These funds will be used for the Aptos renovation. We provided $7,000 to the library for the summer reading program, ran a very successful direct mail fundraiser to celebrate National Library Week. We have a couple of events coming up this weekend. In Felton, there will be an opening celebration of an art walk. It's called an Art Hike for Healing, dedicated to the survivors of last year's fires. It is a joint project between the Friends of the Library, the Felton Library, and the Friends of the Santa Cruz Parks, as well as the library and park system. We're very excited about that. And the Capitola Friends will be hosting a sneak peek virtual tour of the new library space that Board Member Goldstein was referring to earlier. That will be led by Gail Ortiz and Mayor Brooks with a question and answer session that's open to the public, which will include Assistant Library Director Eric Howard. A couple of other things. Generally, I would say we've greatly improved the infrastructure of the organization over the past few months. We've added 2 outstanding staff members, an operations manager, Ms. Rebecca Scott, and a community engagement manager, Grant Simmons. We've greatly improved the flow and efficiency and productivity of that office, as well as the look and feel of our website. We're working with the other chapters as well to get a more coordinated, consistent and integrated web presence across the Friends groups as a whole. So I'm very fortunate in the staff that I've inherited. Finally, the Friends would like to make a formal statement of support for Director Nemet's staffing and opening plan that we will be addressing shortly. As noted earlier, we are really happy that we are moving to modified browsing this month. We hear regularly from our constituents that they want to be back in the libraries. They want the libraries open. The key to getting them there, we believe, is increased staffing, which translates into improved service levels, and a library which is much more open, more fully open, with substantially more public access hours. Ultimately, obvious goal is a fully operational 10-branch library system, but it is going to take some time to get there, particularly with the number of layoffs and furloughs that have happened over the last year because of the pandemic. So we strongly urge you to approve this proposal to start the system back on the path to a full service model. Thank you for your time. That concludes my report, unless there are any questions.
Great, thank you for that report. Lots going on. I'll turn it back to the board to see if there are any members that have questions for Bruce.
Just wanted to say a welcome and thanks. That's a very rich report and very exciting to hear about the organizational structure so everything can work very well. I know though that investment takes time, but it's so worthwhile. So exciting to hear. And also glad that everyone's rolling up their sleeves and looking at the opening and how to do this in a way that's going to really be service forward to our community, but also fiscally prudent, which I know everyone's thinking about and we're going to be talking about here shortly. So wanted to convey my thanks for all your work and welcome again.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Really exciting to see all that progress going on with the Friends as well. Thank you. Okay, are there any members of the public that like to comment on this item?
Chair Bernal, there are no public comments.
Okay, thank you again. With that, we'll move on to the next item, which is a report by Library Advisory Commission.
And we have our chair, Lindsay Bass.
Good morning, board members. Thank you so much. The Library Advisory Commission met on Monday, April 19th via Zoom teleconference. And we made 6 motions as part of our general business agenda. All motions were unanimous with 1 member absent. And I'll just give a brief summary of those motions. First, you heard from Bruce Cotter that the Friends group is endorsing the library's plan for phased reopening. The commission also heard an overview of that plan and reviewed and endorsed the plan. There was also expressions of a desire to see the library return to standard operating hours and standard operations as quickly as possible. So we commend the library and the staff for all the work that they've done to continue to provide services during difficult times, in some cases in ways that are more labor intensive than they have in the past. And the activities that they've outlined moving forward to phase a reopening make a lot of sense and are going to bring back all of its services that are clearly desired and wanted. So that got a full-throated endorsement from the commission. We also discussed and endorsed the elimination of overdue fees at the library. And in reading through the information provided to the commissioners and through a discussion, talked about the fact that late fees have been proven to be a barrier to low-income library users, the fact that thousands of people in the library system can't check out materials because they owe more than $10. So the research shows that if punitive late fees are eliminated, there's a much greater likelihood to get material back and available for recirculation. And given that that is a central focus for the library and its staff, the commission was supportive of the elimination of those overdue fees with the provision that users would be charged for material replacement where that was necessary. The third motion was to support the director on the budget recommendations that were presented. The commission also expressed serious concern with the inclusion of a management analyst in that budget recommendation, which seemed unnecessary. We're aware that that recommendation has come from the JPA, The commissioners articulated that there appears and is a clear nexus between staffing and open hours as the library aims to increase those open hours and reopen, that there is a clear need and no additional analysis should be necessary to understand the staffing needs to support those additional hours. So happy to answer any questions on that. However, that was a unanimous concern across the commission. The fourth motion was to review and endorse the library's approach to service hours in FY22. So glad to see the library thinking creatively about tiering, having branches fall into different tiers that would provide different levels of service hours to help ensure that there is good service hour coverage across all of its main operational regions as they continue to manage and deal with the closures and reopenings of branches that are involved in Measure S renovations and upgrades. The fifth motion that was passed unanimously was to endorse the library's public statement condemning anti-Asian violence. And the commission reiterated our own commitment as the LAC to the inclusion and equity among all groups in the library. And finally, our last motion was to elect a new vice chair. You just heard from the Friends President, Bruce Cotter, who used to be a member of the commission. We are thrilled to have his leadership and support on the Friends side, but that did leave a vacancy in our vice chair position, which has now been filled unanimously by Rena Dubin, who is fantastic. We're very lucky to have her now serving in a leadership role on the commission. This concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Lindsay. Any questions from board members?
I have a question, Chair Bernal.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Chair Bass, for that great summary. Clearly, everyone has been very busy the past months. Sounds like you had a very rich conversation, and I appreciate how well you're articulating all of the actions and rationale. I wanted to go back to the motion where the commission expressed disapproval of inclusion of the management analyst. I just wanted to hear that rationale in a bit more detail because I was hearing it tracking on to operating hours. And I just want to make sure I heard that correctly. So could you provide a little more information around, the discussion around that action and the rationale for it?
Yeah, I think that the main takeaway from the commission was kind of an understanding of the struggle and the challenge to staff the front desk and the concern about spending the resources on a management analyst when that challenge exists to just, make sure that the front line is fully staffed, given that there is a lot of concern about, allowing the library to be able to come back and offer as many service hours as possible at as many branches. That I think the commission's intention is that we prioritize resources to allow that to happen. And the concern that a management analyst and the resources associated with that would pull away from that potentially and make that more difficult.
Okay, so to recap, the sense that you think resources should be prioritized and put into librarians and other staffing to open hours as opposed to supporting the administration of the library. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Lindsay from board members? Okay. Are there members of the public that'd like to comment on this item?
Chair Bernal, there are no public comments.
Okay, Lindsay, thanks. Thank you very much for that report. The commission's also very busy, and thanks for all of their dedication and feedback as well. It's greatly appreciated. Okay, with that, we'll move on to the next item, which is comments by board members. Are there any comments by board members? I don't see any. Okay. Okay, we move on to the next item, which is correspondence by the public, and that's found on pages 9 and 10 of the packet. Are there any questions or comments on item 9? Okay. Next is the consent calendar. Are there items on the consent calendar that the board members would like to pull? Doesn't look like it. Items A through I. Are there members of the public that like to comment on items on the consent calendar?
Chair Brunel, there are no public comments.
Okay, with that, I'll take a motion on the consent calendar.
I'll move approval. Sorry.
Go ahead, Nicole. You go
I'll move
ahead.
approval of the consent calendar.
And I'll second that.
Okay, so you have a motion and a second. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Coburn,
Aye.
Director Goldstein.
Aye.
And, Vice Chair Friend,
Aye.
Chair Bernal.
Aye. Okay, so with that, we'll move on to the next items on the agenda, which is our section of the agenda, which is general business. We have 11A, which is the next steps for reopening the library. Susan, would you like to make a presentation?
Eric Howard, our deputy director, has been really working hard on this,
Okay,
and
Eric.
I'd like him to discuss it.
Okay, all right, thank you. Go ahead, Eric.
Thank you. Good morning, board members. And I also want to thank Laura Whaley, who has been working along with the entire team on this. As you heard earlier, we are super excited. It does feel like we are beginning to turn the corner on this very challenging year. And I also just want to note that while the general public mostly recognizes the library through its beautiful buildings and the services that we provide there, and that's what this report is largely about, it's important to note too all of the ways the library works beyond its walls. And we've continued to do some of the services that we always did pre-COVID, and we also introduced new services beyond the walls this past year, including receiving a grant to work with schools to work with the families at school lunches. And this is the library works on a regular basis to receive grants so that we can bring revenue into the county and improve fuller employment for some of our staff, and then provide these great services as well. Another service beyond our walls, we provide a robust program with the county jails, and that never ceased during this year. We have a great working relationship with the sheriff's office. And lastly, we do a number of other outreach programs, working with partners in the community, including our bookmobile, which is largely returned to its pre-COVID levels. We're still working to get there, and that is dependent on partners and what they allow us to do when we visit their sites. So beyond what's in this report, I just want to note all of the other important services that we provide in the community. And so as you heard earlier too, we are really excited that this month we are kicking off opening the doors. We have always, well, not always during this year, but we worked really hard to provide computer services. Sometimes we were working under a tent outside, and then we moved in the fall to bring those computer services inside. And just as a quick refresher on this really remarkable year, we've gone through a number of iterations on our services at the buildings. First, we started with curbside. Then we moved to what we called grab and go, so that the patrons were allowed to come into the lobbies. And now we're moving to a third stage where the patrons are returning more fully into our building so they can browse items. A key piece of this that we needed to have happen first was ending the quarantine of our items. We were tracking what the other libraries in the region were doing. San Francisco Public Library announced that they had worked with their health department to get the go-ahead to go and end the quarantine of their items. So that allowed us to follow suit. Oregon State, their state librarian announced the same. And so we felt comfortable, and we worked with our union so that we could end that. And then we made that public so that our patrons knew that we had ended that precaution as well, because the science guided it. That allowed us to free up some space. It improved our customer service, and that ultimately led to where we are now, where we are beginning to open the doors to our branches and allow the public to come in and browse. And we do believe that this remains a really safe environment for the staff and the patrons. So we started this week with La Selva. Next week, we move to doing the same at Felton and Live Oak. And then the week after that, we will move to Scotts Valley. And then beginning in June, with the expectation that the governor has really prompted that we'll be moving away from the blueprint altogether. Our expectation is that we will then open fully at those branches, including downtown, so that downtown and then the new Capitola will open fully, so that we will still have, of course, the mask requirement, but the modifications that we have introduced during this just short interim period between now and June, such as capacity limits, will likely disappear. So in a nutshell, that gets us up to June, and then ideally, with more staffing, and as more staffing comes on board, we'll be able to phase up with increased hours. And so that should get us through the summer. And then if we are on target for recruitment, onboarding, then we should be bringing back our standard library operations by early fall. Susan, please let me know what I missed.
I think that summarizes it well. You know, the public really wants to get into the buildings. This is a process to come back from, but I would say in many ways our biggest barrier right now is our staffing levels. And we'll talk about that more as we get into our discussion of hours.
Okay, thank you, Eric and Susan. Are there any questions from board members regarding the presentation?
I have a question, Chair Bernal. Thank you, Eric, for that report and the very clear thought and analysis that went into this. I mean, you had probably, I don't know, a couple dozen variables you're clearly programming here. So this seems like a very complex exercise. So I just had a few questions. One, I noticed on your very excellent Instagram feed, which I do follow, that you'd announced active browsing. And I had mentioned this in my city council meeting last night that Scotts Valley is slated for active browsing to return on May 17th. And I got the excellent question from a council member, what does active browsing mean? So I said, yeah, it sounds like a term of art, but I will check in and get back to them. So could you, I mean, does that mean a specific thing, or does that mean that people are just inside able to move about the library?
Essentially, yes. You know, prior to this, what patrons were really left to do is to browse online and review what we have in the catalog and through our digital collections. And then they always had the opportunity, and we really beefed up during this time our services over the phone so that patrons could talk to librarians and get recommendations for items. And then we also introduced this year basically a collection of books that children could come and pick up as well. And so that they could get their own mini library to take home with them. But this now fully opens the doors and allows patrons to just peruse and use that serendipity to find what they discover and what they want to bring home.
Okay, you can call it serendipitous browsing in the future. Okay.
There you go. I like that.
Okay, I like it. Subject to capacity requirements, of course, right? Yeah. Okay. And then a final thing, just to make sure I understand the sequencing. So with the ending of the quarantine of materials on April 26th, and I'll say I agree with this. I think the science has been clear on this for a while, that wasn't that books, you know, despite our fears and our precautions, which were well placed early in the pandemic, that was not a viable transmission pathway. So that's great. Have all of the interior and exteriors opened across the entire system? or just in that or that staggered order you talked about? So
They,
like, could I go to any branch right now and drop off books?
it is 24/7 now.
Okay, on all of them.
That-
Okay,
that-
so it's just in the active browsing part, the opening of letting people into the building. That's the one that's being phased. That aspect.
Susan's nodding your head. I missed the last piece of your question, though, I'm afraid.
That's the piece that's being phased is
Thank you.
that is correct.
Yeah,
book drops
sorry.
are
Eric.
open.
Yeah, I was trying to distinguish between the book drops being opened and the active browsing being allowed. If they were together being open phasing, or if all the drops had opened now and it was just the phasing that was opening. So
Yeah.
Susan answered that question. Yeah. Okay, those are my questions. Thank you very much. I think this is a great plan. And I also just want to acknowledge that I do recognize and appreciate this is dependent on staffing being there. Being in a city where I had to lay off my entire recreation division, absolutely heartbreaking. And I have the community absolutely clamoring to bring that back. And I understand it. But yet you need the people to design the program. You need the people to bring things back. And so I know how important that is. So I appreciate that. And I join the chorus and wanting to get things open as soon as we safely can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from board members?
Martine, I didn't have a question, but I just wanted to make a comment and say that the county really appreciates the library moving towards reopening. And I think it's consistent with what we're doing here at the county. Our facilities have been open the whole time because of the types of services we provide, but some of our departments and public counters have been closed. So as we move towards June and see the state reopen in the middle of June, I think we'll be working with our departments as well to kind of do something similar on the same timeline where we're opening more and more, with the idea that by September, things will be fully open. So I think this is consistent with what we're seeing here, and we really appreciate everything that the library is doing to make our buildings accessible to folks and to allow library patrons to come back into the facilities, especially our new facilities that are so beautiful.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from board members? All right. Yeah, I think it is exciting just to be able to see things coming back. And as Nicole mentioned, particularly with the new facilities being available and just trying to get back to normal and providing these essential services is exciting to see that start to happen. Although, as has been commented, it's not going to just happen super quickly. It'll ramp up over time, but it's good to have a plan and definitely support moving forward. So with that,
I think, I'm sorry, Martine,
go ahead.
I realize that Laura, who's also helped shape a lot of this, has her hand raised. I don't know if she had something to add to that report.
Yeah, I do.
Well, go ahead, Laura.
When Tina asked about the active browsing, there is one limitation with it, that we are asking patrons to be in the building 30 minutes or less at this time. That helps because we do have the limitations of how many people can be in the building. So I just wanted to throw that in. So thank you.
Sorry, so it's time serendipitous browsing.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura.
Thank you, Laura. Yes. All right. With that, are there any members of the public that have any comments on this item? Item 11A.
Chair Bernal, there are no public comments.
Okay. So with that, I'll take a motion.
Do you need action on this one?
Well, this is endorse.
Just review and endorse. You want us to make a motion? Okay, then I will make a motion to endorse the plan for phased reopening of the library system.
Looks like Jamie's trying to second.
Second.
Second. Okay, great. Okay, we have a motion and a second. May we have a roll call vote?
Director Coburn,
Aye.
Director Goldstein. I can see you nod. Okay. Vice Chair Friend,
Aye.
Aye.
Good. Chair Bernard.
I think Jamie's double muted somehow, but all right.
I think the moderator and I are getting in a mute click off battle is what's happening. I'm not sure. I think we just need to work out between the two of us which one of us is going to mute and unmute me.
Well, that's good to know that somebody's watching you. All right.
I think so.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so that passes unanimously. We'll move on to the next item, which is item B, restoration of base level funding to begin the process for restoring Santa Cruz Public Library hours and services. So this is obviously related to the first item. I'll turn it over to Susan and or Eric.
And in advance, I'm just going to apologize for the complexity of this. In the end, what we tried to do is separate this restoration conversation from the 22 budget, but we can have a conversation about whether that's appropriate. The other thing I wanted to just remind you is last year, as our staffing became so tight, we reorganized administratively, where Laura Whaley had been the regional manager for the San Lorenzo Valley region. Laura actually became our public services coordinator and has been scheduling all of the staff as a way of trying to create some agility in terms of using staff in multiple locations as we had limited staff. So Laura really is our expert at minimum staffing levels and scheduling, and honestly, the union contract. Today, what I'm going to ask is that you approve the restoration of base level funding for personnel expenditures, basically to last year's level, and I'm going to ask that you do it as of today. This would end the furlough of regular employees as of May 14th, 2021. I just have to say the City Council has already made this motion for some of our employee groups. They'll do it, I think, next Tuesday for the remainder. And it's one of those areas where I would just like to have the JPA reaffirm that. We'd like to have our frozen positions reinstated. And there is an addendum to the budget document that shows what the frozen positions are. And we'd like to restore the on-call aid pool, which annualized had been about $825,000. I'd like you to instruct our staff to begin hiring immediately. One of the things we talked about last time is the City of Santa Cruz Human Resource Office is incredibly backed up. And as of July 1st, has immediately 60 positions that they need to hire. I would very much like to have this head start so that we could get at least the pool of candidates available prior to that time. And one of the things, I've gotten a lot of questions by the JPA about appropriate staffing levels by branch. So one of my recommendations is that we develop a subcommittee of the JPA that will spend some time exploring and analyzing our services and staffing levels by branch, so that I think we can increase the comfort level of the board about our long-term goals around staffing. Just to remind you, we reduced our personnel budget by $2.3 million last year. If we can get those resources back, we can begin to hire and then expand hours. We had pulled the Library Advisory Commission into this conversation. On page 80 of your board packet, we began to develop principles around hours. It was based upon some work the board did several years prior. Things like we want to revisit branch hours annually. We want to have minimum levels of hours at small branches. We want to look at things regionally to ensure that there are Saturday, Sunday, every day of the week, and evening hours available in each region. And we want to look at each branch in terms of its facilities. So for example, if you have a large community program room, it affects the level of staffing you need in the building, where Live Oak, while it's a beautiful building, has no community spaces like that, and it should actually reduce their staffing complement. So you can see the kinds of things that the Library Advisory Commission suggests we look at. You know, ultimately, the most important item will be usage, but we're going to struggle with usage statistics through 2024 as our buildings go on and offline for construction. We began to look at a tiered system. For now, we're just calling it tier 1, 2, and 3. Tier 1 would have 30 to 40 hours a week. Tier 2 would have 40 to 50 hours per week. Tier 3 would have 50 to 60 hours a week. We have an idea of which branches would be in the tiers, and you'll see this colored worksheet in front of you. I think the tier 1 smalls are pretty apparent what they're going to be. I think the tier 3, the large, are pretty apparent. I think the Felton, Live Oak, and Branciforte, it's not at all clear where they're going to end up. I also believe in the short run, as we close and open branches for construction, it could push branches into different tiers. And a really good example is when Scotts Valley close, I can guarantee that the use at Felton will grow enough to push it into the larger tier. So the other thing that colorful chart shows is the closures and openings that we need to do over the next year. And you can see the complexity that is staffing each of these branches. I want to remind everyone that, you know, it takes 3 months to 6 weeks to open and close a branch, depending upon how large it is. When we open, we have to set everything up, all the technology, shelve all the books, and you have to shelve them like 5 times to get it right, interestingly enough. We have to do all the signage for the stacks. We have to train the staff. We have new systems. It really does take a significant amount of time. To take down a branch sometimes is even worse. You have to literally go through the entire collection and try to send it to other branches, the high circulating items. You need to box and store all the items that you want to hold on to till the branch opens. And then you have to get rid of every single thing in the building. It's been a really busy time as we've done Garfield Park and Branciforte. On page 81, we're beginning to do proposals around how hours might look by branch. We see 3 major changes. The first one being July 1st, when we're hoping to have at least some of the part-time staff on board. The other one is September. Now, we just learned about Scotts Valley, so we're going to have some conversations about that. But there's a number of openings and closings that occur in the fall. And then there's a number of openings that occur in sort of the February, March of next year. And then there'll be more openings around July 1st and the fall of 2022. We don't expect the downtown branch to be fully completed till 2024. So there'll be a pause in fiscal year sort of 2024. But you can see this is a really difficult and complicated puzzle that Laura Whaley, our expert, and Eric have been trying to puzzle through. One of the things I think we've spent a lot of time discussing is we just are constantly in a position of not being able to backfill someone who's out sick or on vacation, and really getting to incredibly low staffing levels. We have been in this past year forced to close branches because we couldn't even maintain a minimum staffing level. We had been doing it slightly the year before, but it really got out of hand. One of the things that Eric, I'd like you to talk about is just this concept of we are over relying on temporary staff. Do you want to speak to that?
Well, thanks. Ideally, we want to use temporary staff as substitutes for when someone is out, or as kind of an auxiliary force. But in a way, as Susan mentioned, it's incredibly labor intensive to bring up and take down these libraries. You know, in most library systems, you're working on one building. Here we're working on all of them, and so we want to be able to ideally have enough staff so that we don't always have to rely on temp staff to fill in when someone is sick or on vacation. But it's been worse than that. In the past, we have become overly reliant on the temp staff just to maintain the regular staffing levels. And there's another piece of this equation. There's a higher turnover rate with the temp staff. And so the library ends up spending a lot of resources on training and recruitment and interviewing and onboarding. And so we would really like to get those hours back to public service instead of spending it training this revolving door of temporary staff. And it would also free us up because we have to scramble so frequently to fill these gaps just so that we can keep the doors open, maintain that staff have the breaks guaranteed through our union contracts, et cetera. So long term, I would really like to see the operation of the library become less dependent on the temporary staff and invest the time in public service rather than in maintaining this revolving door of temporary staff.
And then I just want to say, it was in your consent packet, get an updated dashboard from the city of Santa Cruz for the quarter ending March 2021. You know, a huge aspect to this is, do we have the money? And right now, the city of Santa Cruz is estimating that we will have a $2.7 million reserve and a $4.1 million fund balances. I do believe, sorry, the phone takes over my headset. We'll have $4.1 million in fund balance. I do believe we have the resources to begin this hiring so that we can begin to staff up. And we can talk a little bit later about the fund balance and how we got there. But the largest component is our revenues have been coming in much higher than we anticipated in the area of sales tax.
Okay. Any other comments or presentation items, Susan, from staff?
I would love to take questions because I'm assuming you have many.
Okay. All right. Why don't we turn over to questions then? Questions from board members? Would like to go?
I can go ahead and start. I do have some questions, and I'll start off by just saying I appreciate all of the information in this item. It's a lot of information to unpack and a lot of actions that you're asking of us. One of my questions just has to do with how the hours presented here compare to where we were before the pandemic when we had our facilities open. I'm curious in total how many hours the branches were open. You don't have to describe it by branch, but I'm just trying to get a sense of perspective in terms of where we were and where we're going. That would be helpful. And Susan, do you want to take questions one by one, or do you want me to?
May I just have Kira look that up? Kira, do you have access to that document?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
The number of hours we had prior to the pandemic.
Yeah, let me go find that.
And we probably need when all branches were open though.
And then my next question would have to relate to these different scenarios. And for me, this is a good example of all of these scenarios are very clear, and I can understand what you're suggesting in terms of when each branch would open and close and how many hours in total they would be open, and all of that. But in terms of trying to understand how that relates to what your staffing levels are, I'm trying to get a sense of what your permanent and temporary FTE requirements are for each of these scenarios. So when you're asking us to reinstate the frozen positions and the temporary on-call aid pool, I'm trying to understand, it looks like for the current, you can operate as is, but on July 1st, you're going to need temporary staff. And I don't know if that means you're going to need the entire pool or most of the pool or half of the pool. So that's a question I have. And then that kind of relates to what Eric was just saying about potentially having us look at switching to more temporary staff, or excuse me, permanent staff versus temporary staff. And depending on when you need that whole pool, if we're going to examine that, should we do that examination and then potentially, depending on what the recommendation is, try to figure out if we want to add more permanent staff versus continue with the size of the pool you currently have. So if you could maybe talk a little bit about that, that would be helpful to me. And
Right now we have about 67 people, or last year we had about 67 people in that pool, and their workloads vary dramatically. I believe that our plan would begin to just hire as many as possible. The nature of that contract is if later you wanted to convert temporaries to permanents, you can do that. What you can't do is easily convert permanents to temporary. So that is why we thought we could have the study group looking and doing that analysis, because it would be relatively simple to convert temporary staff to more permanent.
okay. Maybe I'll stop there for now and see if other board members have questions. I probably will come back to the subcommittee later.
Okay. Okay, well, I'll just sort of go around. Other
Can I
questions?
just, Nicole, just to answer your question, the total open hours prior to the pandemic, which was about fall of 2019, the total was 343 hours system-wide, and that was with Capitola, Felton, and La Selva Beach closed.
Thank you, Kira.
What was that number again, Kira? You said 343?
Correct.
Okay. Other questions from board members? Tina?
I have a question. It's okay, Martine. So yeah, thank you for that. And thank you, Nicole, for your questions. That was helpful for me as well. So I always appreciate learning from other board members' queries and thoughts on things. So the recommendation, we have the furlough, reinstating the frozen positions, and those were 13 positions I know noted in report. And those positions are, I'm sure it's in here somewhere, but those are librarians, library aides. So these are direct service positions out in the branches, I believe, to kind of just get us to a baseline. And so it seems that our model, and I know the model fairly well, when the switch was made some years back to really rely on temporaries, and that's sort of augmented. So the question is to restore the on-call pool. So there's a maximum exposure of $825,000 on an annualized basis, but I'm presuming that we're not going to get there to the full 825,000 with all of the changes. And so you're saying is like, I just would like to have the capacity and the space to staff to meet these objectives for the reopening, the closing, and the shifting around of resources. And then concurrently, there would be a subcommittee of this board that would work on a more permanent, sustainable from an operational service level as well as from a financial perspective. That's what I heard. I just want to clarify that was the proposal here.
That was my intent.
Okay. And on the subcommittee, Did we put a timeline on that? Or
I did not,
that,
but I would be happy to.
yeah, that just how quickly that subcommittee should work and when those recommendations should come back. I think that would be a great point for the board to discuss. Okay, with that clarification, I don't have any other questions right now.
Okay. Jamie, did you have questions?
Yeah, so my question was the frozen positions we're talking about, the full-time, is that the 13 positions? Is that correct?
I just want to go back. So they're on page 29 of your budget packet. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Yes. They just
Okay.
list them.
Okay, so it's the 13 positions, and that is the, sorry, I'm going back to.
There is $1,000
annualized cost.
And yes, that is the estimate of what they cost to take away. We would feed them into the personnel system, which would give us a number close to that. That's an estimate.
Okay. I think that's my only question. Thank you.
And just Tina, just to respond, we have one programmer analyst, which is an IT position, but we really do think of that as a frontline position. We've had so many technological requirements and changes over the last year and the next we expect. We really believe that's a frontline position as well.
Okay. Jamie, other questions? Okay. I'll go back around to Nicole. Do you have some additional questions?
I don't know if I have additional questions, but regarding this subcommittee, I think that's a great idea to establish that, to explore these issues. And I know that the county would be interested in participating on the subcommittee since we have so many branches in the system. And so I would make that request if, you know, the county could be a part of that. In terms of the timeline, it seems like we should get going on analyzing this and potentially have something in place. You're looking to be fully open by the fall, although the larger reopenings wouldn't happen until maybe the spring timeframe. So I don't know if fall or the end of this calendar year. I'd be interested in what other board members think in terms of having something back from that group to present to the library JPA. But it seems that at a minimum, probably by the end of this calendar year, but potentially sooner if need be. And I would also say this subcommittee is a good example of where some analyst help would be needed. And so whether that's, I know we're going to get into the budget in the next item, but whether that's adding something to the budget to assist the subcommittee in doing that analysis, or hiring a consultant to help the subcommittee with that analysis. I think something is needed because it seems as if the library is just has a lot going on, and I'm not sure they have the capacity to do it all. They don't have a lot of analysts within their FTE count currently. So I think something is needed, and we can talk about what that might be.
Okay. All right. Let's see. I don't have any major questions. I agree with respect to the comment around the subcommittee. I think it'd be good to have a subcommittee that can sort of delve into some of the specifics and questions around that. And right now, obviously, there's a lot of questions with all the status of the branches and ongoing changes and all that. So that makes sense, I think, to understand that and how it relates back to the budget. I also agree with the comment about analytical support. And I know we're going to talk about that in the budget. In that, yeah, I mean, for an agency of this size, you really do need to have some in-house, capacity you have to be able to do the basics really well. I understand the concerns about priorities and with direct services, which are very critical, of course, but also you have to have your basic fundamental functions have to be done well in order to support those things. But we'll talk about that further. Okay.
Can I just make 2 comments about
Yeah.
timing?
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
really think in order to make a mid-year budget adjustment, we tended to need sort of decisions made by October to make a full year budgetary change. We probably need to have those decisions made by March. So it depends upon what funding cycle you want to affect.
Okay. All right. So we'll come back to the committee discussion and the recommendations. All right. So, okay. I'll then turn it over to see if there's any members of the public that'd like to comment on this item.
Chair Bernal, I do believe there's a public comment. It's from Diane Cowan. It says, "We have been chronically understaffed for years. Please approve staffing levels to pre-pandemic levels and consider increasing funding for staff. I agree, as a staff member who has participated in many group discussions, that our reliance on temporary staff affects morale, efficiency, and services." That ends the comment.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more comments?
I was going to make some comments.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, so right at the top, number 1 is in terms of the recommendations is to end the furlough. I think that makes complete sense. I fully support that, and I can make a motion to do that once I get through my comments here. The temporary staffing, I think that makes a ton of sense to get back. I know that there's a process that we're going to need to bring those folks on board, get them trained and get them going. And then I really do support the idea of a subcommittee, because this has been a question this board has had for a while, and trying to understand this relationship between the hours and the staffing and the overall costs. I think that Nicole had a good idea there, potentially whether we do it in this item or we do it in the budget. I mean, maybe we would need to do it in this item, is appropriate some sort of limited allocation of funding to get ourselves the analytical support that the subcommittee would need to develop a good recommendation. So I think we might want to think about like just a one-time allocation of $25,000 or something, unless somebody has a better number to toss out there. The full-time staffing, though, I'm concerned about, and here's why. In Capitola, we are holding 10% of our FTEs pre-pandemic vacant at this point because we're not balanced. We don't have the budget capacity to bring ourselves all the way back. And I think that some of the other jurisdictions are in the same boat. So I just don't, when I turn the page and I look, I completely understand everybody's frustration around the staffing. The problem is when I turn the next page, I see a budget that's, I don't remember if it was 1.6 or 1.7 in the red. So I don't know that we have the, funding to do this. So I would be okay with just sort of immediately authorizing a recruitment for maybe, 10 of the FTEs that have been, of the 13 FTEs that have been frozen, to sort of start the process to get us back, and then consider the remaining 3 in the budget when we have a more holistic conversation about the deficit and the overall spending levels. And it's not that I'm trying to starve the library by any stretch of the imagination. I just don't want us to strangle ourselves in deficit. So that's my only concern. And those are my comments. And I'm ready to make a motion when everyone else is, if that's what we want to do.
Okay, why don't we go around and see if there's any more comments.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll just add that at our last meeting, we did give the library direction, and I think it was in the motion to spend down the fund balance. I'm going to be bringing this up at the next item, but there are some significant fund balances and reserves. And so I think in terms of, I recognize what Jamie's saying about all of our jurisdictions trying to be conservative and cautious and holding positions vacant. I mean, I'm still grappling with, you know, the full-time versus temp budgets and what's appropriate or not versus the hours. But I think at this point, I'm a little bit more comfortable given the significant sizes of the fund balances to both end the furlough and fund the frozen positions. Moving forward with the branches opening, we're going to need those positions at some point anyway. So I think I don't share as all of Jamie's concern, but I acknowledge where it's coming from. And I'll let, if Tina has other comments, I'll let her speak.
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. Yeah, I do. And I first want to thank the library for this report and the work also. I don't recall if I said that earlier. It's good analysis and really helped our discussion today. I, as always, appreciate hearing from the other board members. I too absolutely support ending the furlough. I think that is in line with where everything is with our fiscal reality and with the operational needs. In terms of the frozen positions and the on-call, you know, I think I have a slightly different, maybe a swap tack than Jamie's. Is I think that the frozen FTE should be brought back on board. And just to clarify, I know we're saying 13, but if I look at our current position vacancy list in Appendix E in the budget, I'm seeing 11.43. So it just might be a little bit of error there, but I'm seeing, you know, a half-time accounting assistant, 0.63 of admin assistant 2, bookmobile library assistant 0.8, information technology specialist 1 position, 3 librarian 2 positions, 2.5 library assistant 2 positions, a library information specialist, library specialist training coordinator, and program analyst 2, which Susan spoke to earlier. And I do see those as core, as really backbone building across the system. And I think that I would rather restore the frozen positions, but then use the temporary as a pressure valve, you know, because I think those hours are very easy to ratchet up or down. If we want to, you know, we're feeling uncertain if we've got some different fiscal news coming up. So restore the positions, but then have that ability to phase up or phase down with the temporary hours if we're finding we've got a shortfall in front of us. And I think that is maybe for all of the operational shortfalls of having such a large temporary or worker core, I think that ability to very flexibly respond to changes in revenue is, you know, could be seen as a plus side of it. And I think that does provide a lot of flexibility. And then also, yeah, looking at the fund balance. And in our next item, I am looking forward to talking about long range projections, because I know we have a fund balance that gets us through the next couple of years. But, you know, of course, all of us are thinking, what about in year 3 and year 4, year 5? What does that look like long range? And do we have those projections? And then also, I just want to confirm that doing this plan does not actually add any new FTE or hours. This is just getting us back to where we were. Okay, Susan's confirming. I thought that. You know, and something too, in speaking with Susan, she was describing to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, about how thinking about library services, sometimes it's easier to talk in hours rather than FTE. And so I think that the work of the subcommittee will be very interesting, you know, to explore that point too. So I support the recommendation as presented. I also wholeheartedly support the subcommittee. I want to note that it is going to be a fairly complex body if you look at the membership as proposed, because we have a subcommittee of the board, and that would be no more than 2 members here, so we don't have quorum issues. Members of the Library Advisory Commission at an unspecified number, the employee unions, and then management, presumably coming together. So you've got a lot of different interests coming together. I don't think it's going to be a quick process. I think that the March timeline you outlined is probably much more reasonable to work through this, because we're talking about a system change in the library that has just, you know, impacts that will ripple through everything. So I think that the subcommittee should give itself the time and space to do that work well. And I absolutely agree with the analytical support. I think that whoever's going to be on this is going to look at comparators, look at data, really run analyses, understand budgetary impacts. And that could be a pretty complex data set required to make prudent recommendations back to the board. So I recommend the subcommittee. I think we should set March. I don't know if it's March 31st is a deadline, and I think that there should be some level of resources attached to that. I don't know if 25,000 would be sufficient. possibly not, but we can maybe talk about that. And then I do support the county being on it, and I would also recommend Jamie Goldstein from Capitola being on it as well as the two members. Jamie has a deep experience and a deep interest in this. I know he looks at these issues really carefully, and I think that he would be a very capable representative for that. So those are my comments. So I don't know, Jamie or Nicole, if you wanted to make a motion, but I think you see where everyone is on this.
Okay, I'd like to just make a quick comment before we get into motions, if that's okay. So my perspective with respect to the staffing issue is that, I mean, the staffing has to correspond with the hours that we're, so if we're going to adjust the staffing, then we need to look at adjusting the hours. I too think that there's some flexibility here to be able to adjust if something happens, both with respect to just the fund balance and as well as with even the temporary staffing hours, as was commented on. So I think that again, we need to focus on providing the level of staffing and support that's required for the hours that we want to have available and level of service that we want available fundamentally. All right, are we ready for a motion?
Can I ask one more clarifying question, Marcy?
Sure, go ahead.
So with this recommendation, are you making budget adjustments if we approve this? Are you restoring this funding in this fiscal year through the end, or would it be effective July 1st for the new fiscal year?
I'm sorry. Our goal would be to make budget adjustments for this fiscal year, and it would be a % of total that is appropriate.
So it's like a prorated amount for what you need for the rest of this fiscal year. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that.
I would suggest, though, that it's likely that we'll actually have much expenditure because of the time it takes to hire. And just, Tina, to clarify, we have the highest % of part-time employees of any department in the city. And so one is headcount, the other is FTE. The 13 is bodies.
Yeah. Okay, other question? Jamie, go ahead.
I was just going to try to make a motion if we're ready for that here.
Okay.
Okay. So first off, I want to thank Director Coburn. I honestly, I got caught on the charts, which were showing a lot less fund balance. I didn't realize that we were up over $4 million in fund balance, which gives us more of a cushion. And so I think that changes my opinion about the reinstating the permanent positions. So I would move that this board authorize the end of the furlough as of May 14th, consistent with the City of Santa Cruz Council's recommendation. I would also move that we reinstate the resources to fund the frozen positions. And I think that's the 13 positions. That was what Director Nimitz, you just clarified for us?
That are listed in the back of the budget book.
Okay. And then restore the temporary on-call aid pool, and then we make the budget amendments necessary to authorize that expenditure this year if needed. Then I would move that we appoint the county, and it sounds like Scotts Valley has nominated me as well, and I'd be willing to serve on that subcommittee. And I would also move that we make a one-time appropriation of $30,000 to provide analytical support for that committee. And I'm open to friendly amendments on that. And that's my motion.
Okay, the motion.
I'm good with the motion. I would just add a friendly amendment. I agree with the timeline that Tina put forth. And so I would add that the subcommittee would meet as needed and come back with recommendations by March for the new fiscal year of, what is that? By that point, it's the 22-23 fiscal year.
Yeah, I'd love to see it happen a little bit quicker, but we do need the timeline in there. So
yeah, no later than March.
Okay. Totally good part of my motion. Thank you. Okay.
And with respect to the dollar amount for the analytical support, I guess the other thing too is depending on how it moves forward, Susan can come back and adjust it depending on how it's worked out, whether it's a consultant or however else. So, okay. Any other
And
comments?
just one clarifying question. Did we have the line in there that was recommended to instruct staff to begin the hiring, orientation, and training immediately?
Yes, that's right.
That was in there? Okay, I must have missed that. Great.
Okay, so we'll add that too. Okay. All right. Any other questions, comments regarding the motion?
I think we might need a second, actually. We had a friendly
Oh.
amendment.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, all right. Okay.
I may have missed it. I'm sorry if I did.
No, I think I assumed when Nicole said I'd go with that was the second, but that's okay. All right, we should be clear about that. Okay, so we have a motion by Board Member Goldstein, a second by Board Member Friend, with some friendly amendments. I think it's essentially the staff recommendations with clarifications on the subcommittee participants and the timing around that, and the addition of resources for analytical support for that committee, essentially. Okay, maybe I should turn it over to the public now for public comments before we take a vote on this item.
Chair Bernal, there are no public comments.
Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and do a roll call vote. Thank you.
Director Coburn,
Aye.
Director Goldstein, I'm sorry, Vice Chair Friend,
Aye.
Chair Bernard.
Aye. Okay, that passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we're now on to the next item, which is 11C, which is the fiscal year 2022 Santa Cruz Public Library budget recommendation.
Thank you for that. I'm very appreciative and actually immensely relieved. Thank you. We're presenting sort of the first reading of our proposed 2021-22 Joint Powers Authority budget. Our hope is that you review it this month and place it on the agenda for June for final approval. I begin the budget packet talking about some of the work we've done in the past and outlining new requests. We have a request for a management analyst. We have a request to eliminate overdue fees, which is something that we had looked at last year before COVID came. We had some slight changes to positions that need to be approved. They're less financial, but they need to be approved by the board. We're requesting 4 FTE in LA2s. We want to improve our capital maintenance fund by $50,000 as per our original plan. And then we are also asking for some professional services. Some of the things I'd like to go into more detail about really is the elimination of overdue fees. And I'd like Sarah Harbison, who's our collection management service manager, to talk to us about the work the staff has done in reviewing the issues surrounding fines and fees. Sarah?
Hi, good morning. Good morning, board members. Thank you for having me this morning. As Susan said, I'm Sarah Harbison. I'm manager of collection management services, and I'm joining you this morning to provide more information about the proposal to eliminate overdue fines. And I have a short presentation, so I'm going to attempt to share my screen with you. I have a few slides. Okay, and okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So the proposal as part of the budget is to eliminate overdue fines on all library materials, and that includes waiving existing overdue fines on patron accounts. And this is to increase access and remove financial barriers. So after a very difficult year like this one, we would really like to welcome back many of our patrons with a fresh start. and have them come in and check out as many materials without having to worry about their existing overdue fines, and then also possibly accruing more overdue fines. In 2018, this board agreed to eliminate overdues on the kids and teens materials. And so far it's gone very well. I'd just like to share a couple of quick stories that I reached out to some of our librarians for. And so one of our librarians shared a story of a father with 2 young children who would come in and they would always return their materials, but often they'd be a little bit late. And so as you can imagine with young children, parents are usually checking out armloads of books, bagfuls of books, because they go through the books very quickly. So at 25 cents a day per item, it adds up very quickly. So it turned out one day he said, you know, I can't use the library anymore. We're not going to come. This is getting too expensive for us to afford. And the librarian, of course, was always working with him, trying to make the best of the situation, but he left in frustration. And then he came back about a year later, and this was after the overdues on kids and teens materials was approved. And so the librarian approached him and said, no, I don't know if you heard, but we're no longer charging overdue fines on books. And he was so relieved. And he explained that the reason it was so hard for him to get the items back on time was because his kids traveled between 2 households. So it was often difficult for them to bring the books back from the other household and get on time. So anyway, it was a huge relief, and he came back and he's now reading with his kids again. Okay. So I just wanted to outline that overdue fines create barriers to access for those who most need the library. So in early 2020, which is going back to pre-COVID, when we had good data, approximately 7% of patrons, which was 11,500 of our patrons, were blocked from checking out library materials because they owed more than $10 on their library accounts. And that's substantial, that 7% of people with cards could no longer check out materials because they owed money. And it's often those who are not able to pay down their fines who are least likely to be able to afford purchasing books or paying for streaming services such as Netflix or Hulu. So 2 of our professional organizations have recently issued resolutions on monetary fines. So the American Library Association, in just about 2 years ago, stated that libraries will need to take determined and pragmatic action to dismantle practices of collecting monetary fines. And then just last month, the California Library Association endorsed a resolution encouraging cities, counties, and special districts to work with their public libraries to consider eliminating late fines for library patrons. And I just wanted to show how this ties in with our strategic plan. One of the library's values is free access. And we've really been working toward living up to that value. And so in the past few years, we've eliminated the $2 replacement card fee and the $5 interlibrary loan fee. And as I mentioned earlier, in 2018, eliminated the 25-cent per day overdue fine for children's and teen materials. And then just recently in this past year, we've had a temporary suspension of overdue fines. And we also waived replacement charges for materials lost in the CZU fires. So eliminating overdue fines does not mean eliminating due dates. Items are still due back by their due date. And libraries who have done this recently, eliminating the overdue fines, have not found that items come back any later, if at all late, by eliminating the overdue fines. That most patrons really do look at the due date and are not thinking about how much it's going to cost them if they keep it a little bit longer. They're very cognizant of that due date. And if a patron does not return a library item, or if it's damaged, we still would charge them for that. And as the LAC Chair Lindsay Bass mentioned earlier in this meeting, at the Commission's April meeting, they endorsed eliminating overdue fines for all materials. And this is just a sampling of some of the public libraries who are fine-free. You'll see some of our neighbors on here: Los Gatos Public Library, Santa Clara County Library District, and then just recently Boston Public Library announced that they will eliminate overdue fines. And these are a couple of quotes from directors of two big library systems that have gone fine-free. I especially like the second one from Peter Bromberg, Salt Lake City Public Library. And it's always a good thing when you can change the nature of an interaction between staff and patrons from a debt collection conversation to something more enriching, such as providing readers advisory or introducing patrons to new services or resources. So thank you for your time this morning, and I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Okay, thank you. Why don't we take questions on the fines first, and then we'll continue with the rest of the presentation if there's anything else.
Chair Bernal, I have a couple of questions.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
All right, Sarah, thank you so much for that presentation. It was a wonderful augmentation of what was in the packet, and always nice to hear it presented verbally. So I just wanted to clarify a couple of points. One is that you reminded the board that the board had already eliminated fines on the youth and teen materials, and that had happened, what, 2019, you said?
In 2018.
In 2018. Okay, so 2018. So then this would apply to just the rest of the collection.
That's right.
Okay, that's okay. Okay, and I was hoping you could tell us a little bit more about the staff process to enforce fines. I mean, going to the quote you just read from the Salt Lake City Public Libraries, what is it? What's entailed in maintaining that sort of record and going after the collection of it?
Sure. Well, in normal times, which is not right now, but there's a fine threshold of $10 on patron accounts. So if they owe $10 or more, they're blocked from checking out more materials. So if they get email notices, they'll be notified that items are overdue. We always send courtesy notices. But oftentimes when they come to the libraries to use the self-check machine, they'll be notified that they're blocked then, or with staff. And so they'll have the opportunity to pay. Of course, staff sometimes makes exceptions for whatever reason. But usually it's informing the patron that they owe money on their account, and then either collecting money in cash or check, or instructing them how to pay on credit card. And so, as you can imagine, many people are happy to pay, and then for others, it's really a hardship for them to be able to pay their library fines and continue to use the library.
You muted.
Yeah, thank you. So this means that at every branch then we have cash handling facilities, we have safes, we have policies and procedures, we have PCI compliant credit card machines. I presume we would still have to keep some of that and those processes going for the replacement work, but it seems like perhaps the volume of that could be reduced significantly.
And we are trying to move away from cash handling altogether. When we finalize our system and all the buildings open up, our goal is to only go with a credit card and the staff not handling money at all.
Okay. Okay, and then I just did some quick math, and if it's $10 and it's a quarter a day, then that's 40 days for one item, 2 items, 20 days, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I can see that it can add up. And I know, having a small child, you try to get there your best on a Saturday, and then your week, there it is. And then now it's been 10 days before you know it. So that's my life too. So, all right, well, thank you for that presentation.
Any other questions for Sarah?
I have one question is there like, what happens if somebody is just late all the time? Like if somebody's really taking advantage of this and just realizes that or decides that they can hold books instead of 4 weeks, 8 weeks. Is there any process by which that there's any recourse for a patron like that who's with this new system?
Well, we always send courtesy notices informing patrons that their items are overdue. And if they go past that 28 days overdue mark, then they are charged for the replacement cost of the item. And then their account would be blocked and they would not be able to borrow any more items.
But if somebody is just chronically 21 days late returning,
I don't think we would track that. No.
I would say that the extreme that we see is that there are people that have used the library to steal things and pawn them. And this was a bigger issue in the era of DVDs. But right now, the vast majority of the things in our collection do not have huge value. The other thing I would say is, let's say they took 20 items of value out of the library, it would block them after that one incident.
I'm actually not as concerned about people stealing from the library as just, you know, I know that often I'll be looking for a book and it's like the lead time is 8 weeks or 9 weeks. And if everybody in front of me is holding on to it even longer, then it's suddenly half a year, which, you know, ends up becoming, it's not available at the library effectively at that. So I'm not as worried about people stealing stuff. I'm just worried about if we end up in a situation where people are taking advantage of no fines and just holding on to things consistently for longer. That's where I'm coming from.
There is data from other libraries who have eliminated overdue fines, and they have found that their items are not more overdue than they were previously to eliminating the fines.
And you'll realize that as we move to digital content, this becomes a non-issue.
I'm sorry, you're muted, Jamie.
Your digital content evaporates when it's at the end date.
Right.
Sorry, one more question. What about the telescopes? Would the telescopes not be subject when something that has this long wait list? And
I think it's possible you could end up with phone calls. But again, I think, you know, there's someone who could abuse the system. It gives capacity to do so. I think we're just looking at cost benefit.
Thank you.
Okay. And it sounds like those are probably rare occurrences anyway. But okay, any other questions for Sarah from board members?
You know, I have one more question, Martine, and this is maybe more of a process question. So I did have some on the fines and fees schedule in the proposed budget document. Should I ask those now, or should I wait till we get into more in the budget document itself?
Oops,
I'm sorry, I can't hear you, Susan.
I wasn't going to go through the full budget document. If that's okay, I was going to really sort of focus on my introductory letter, what we're asking for, and sort of some concerns that we have coming up. So why don't you go for it, Tina?
Okay, I'll go for it now. Okay, so I'm referring to, for the board and members of the public, I'm looking at page 21 in the actual proposed budget document, the fines and fee schedule. And on the schedule, there are some line items which are in red font, and those are the ones that are proposed to be suspended. And that's the alignment with this conversation. So I see the overdue item fee, 25 cents a day, that would be suspended. And but then there's some others. And so I had a question on, so a flash drive fee, previously that was $5 and that's suggested to be nothing. So is that giving people a flash drive or allowing them to use a flash drive? I thought, is this like a repeat cost the library is incurring that we're giving away? I just didn't understand that one. The headphone fee, similar question. Are we giving out materials that we normally loan, that we, or do we normally, is it kind of more of a sale basis? the library card replacement fee, I understand that, and I saw that referenced. But then also on the missing parts fine, this is about 2/3 of the way down. That one is supposed to not have any charges. However, I thought, isn't that similar to a damaged item fine, which is a little further up on the schedule, which would still be charged for it. So for instance, if I get part of a book and there's components of it missing, wouldn't that be considered damaged? And we should recover the cost to replace that item, since it probably doesn't have its full value and utility for other readers if it's missing those parts. And so again, fine questions, but just when I popped ahead looking at this schedule.
I think you found an error in our document, Tina.
Okay.
We had also put things in red for people to look at. And so I have the feeling this hasn't been fully updated.
Okay.
The flash drive, the headphone fee, and the missing parts fine, I do think will continue as currently, no change in the current.
Okay.
We will get that chart updated for the final board packet.
Okay.
Kira,
Thank
am I correct?
Yes, we'll get that updated.
Okay, thank you.
That was a Susan, you're supposed to look at this, and I clearly didn't. So.
Okay. Any other questions on this topic then? As it relates to the budget? Doesn't look like it. Okay. Thank you, Sarah.
I just want to say a few things. And I have a letter in the beginning of the budget book, but I just want to warn you a couple things that are coming up. We need to complete the cost study for overhead charges. The LFA needs to complete the MOE discussion. We need to finish a discussion about long-term maintenance of our facilities. It would be nice to have a 10-year capital maintenance plan when we're done with that discussion. We need to sign leases for all 10 of our buildings. And in the next 2 years, we need to move the administrative staff to the administrative building and the downtown branch staff to the downtown library. And we need to move our server room. So and then I'm sorry, I forgot also, we need to do our strategic plan in the next year. And so we have a lot of administrative analysis that needs to occur. And I know that as part of our discussion, we have the management analyst. We also, in our recommendations, have a pool of funds to help us hire technical expertise because we don't have enough staff to do all of that work. I believe that technical support or the management analyst can be kind of looked at as a whole. We just have all these tasks we got to do. How are we going to organize ourselves to do them? And so I would be happy for any insight or recommendations that you could give me on that. That's work above and beyond our day-to-day work and above and beyond the facility changes.
Okay. Thank you for that summary. So I'll turn it over now to board members to see if they have any questions on this budget.
Martine, I don't have, well, I guess I have some comments if I could go ahead.
Yeah.
One is that here at the county, we've started to have conversations already with Capitola about the lease between the county and Capitola, and eventually the branch is going to be subleased to the library system. We have a longstanding agreement with Capitola going back to the redevelopment days, and they're actually supposed to lease their branch to us for up to 99 years, and then we can sublease it to our library operator. So with Capitola opening in June, we've had to start those conversations and figure out how we're going to proceed. I know Jamie has an interim plan in the meantime to allow for right of entry of the library, but I just wanted to note that conversations have started on leases, and I agree we need leases on all of our branches. We do have an existing lease on Felton, and when we entered into that, we actually had to make some decisions about maintenance and how we were going to handle maintenance. And at the time, we had passed down some minor maintenance to the library, but the county retained control of major maintenance items. And so we might have to revisit that going forward. But I say all this just to note that the county started to think about these things. And because of the Capitola lease requirement, we started a pilot project to come up with a capital reserve plan looking at that branch specifically, because of the county, as a result of our RDA agreement, we're responsible for the maintenance. So we're hoping to use this pilot project in Capitola to help us figure out maybe a path forward, even for the whole library system. And so we've engaged a consultant just to help us think through what major maintenance at Capitola looks like. And hopefully maybe that'll inform the larger process. So whether we can use that consultant on other branches or potentially use county staff to use whatever work comes out of that pilot has yet to be determined. But I'm hopeful that it'll at least provide us some preliminary information as we're trying to grapple with these issues. In relationship to the management analyst, right now the library only has one principal administrative analyst, and there are a lot of issues that the library is going to have to grapple with and provide information to the board. So I continue to support the library in needing some more analytical help, and whether, I know in our last item we talked about maybe a consultant or some one-time, but on an ongoing basis, I'm not sure the library can provide the board with all that we're asking with just one analyst. So I do think there is a need for more analytical support, and I don't think that by providing that, we can't also grapple with, you know, what other staff to open branches and provide open hours that we also need. I don't think those are mutually exclusive. So I would be supportive of including more analytical support in the budget. And I think I'll open it, I'll leave it to if any other board members have comments, but just wanted to provide those.
Okay, thank you, Nicole. I'll just go around. And Tina, do you want to go next with any comments?
Thank you, Martine. Great comments, Nicole. Yeah, I wanted to speak to a couple in here. So the overdue fees, I think that sounds like a good approach. I think that's been well reasoned and the rationale is good. And so I would support going forward with that. I think there's a great case to be made for equity, and it also does reduce some of this transactional burden on staff to have to deal with. So I would support that, removing that revenue from the budget, making that change. A couple questions on the positions. There's discussion of just transferring or changing an admin assistant to a courier driver. Making some position changes and then adding some library positions. And I wonder, is this something that you feel very certain we need to insert into the budget now, or should that be folded into the larger subcommittee process we talked about in the last agenda item? You know, a sense of how do we optimally provide library services with our current staffing model? And I was just thinking, should that be part of that conversation, or, you know, are our needs for this present irrespective of what that committee does? That's one of my questions there.
I think the position changes, I actually would love to do now as we're hiring, so that we don't have people in positions that need to be changed, and they're really small, but the HR requires the board approval on them. I think, I hate to do this because we continually do this and it makes it really difficult to plan, but The 4 FTE, if the subcommittee wanted, could make a recommendation in October about that. And so maybe the subcommittee doesn't end their work by March, or they end their work by March, but maybe there's 2 phases. What do we need to continue the year? And what do we do? What is our long-term staffing strategy? The thing that's been really hard is that this board has tended to do incremental decisions like that. So we end up having 2, 3, 4 budget cycles in a year, which really is hard to plan for. It's really hard to plan ahead when, honestly, we could be tracking our timing on our LA2 positions now, looking at our list, determining when and if we're going to be able to hire. If we wait till October and it gets approved in January, it just requires more work. And it feels like we've done half your budget since I've been here. We've had to come back every January because we haven't had confidence in our fiscal position for the whole fiscal year. And I think if you look at the data in the budget document, our fiscal position has been positive for the 5 years that I've been here. And I guarantee you, if you hire the 4 LA2s, they will be in the analysis that you do. They're our very frontline worker.
Yeah, and I didn't have a strong feeling about that. I just wondered, is this an opportunity to have a more holistic analysis? Or is this, this is a baseline foundational need, irrespective of what happens with the other analysis? So yeah, just where I'm coming from, it wasn't a strong thing. And I do recognize and support that we have new libraries coming on board. We have larger libraries coming on board. We are always going to be a large community interest in more hours and more availability of resources. And so I know that with all of our organizations, that amounts to staffing. People are what drive great organizations. And when you don't have people, that really limits your ability to deliver all the greatness you want. Okay, and then so my final comment on this is just to kind of echo what Nicole said about the analytical ability, and also provide a little more clarity maybe for folks. So the library is about an $18 million enterprise. It's got complex funding structure. That's the way things are set up, and won't be probably simplified anytime soon, if ever. It has 10 branches plus a bookmobile. You have an incredibly complex staffing model. You have ever shifting needs. I know that all your staff are so resilient across the 10 branches. You try to provide micro programming, macro programming. It's a really intricate organization. And to be able to deliver that, the organization really needs that in-house ability to provide the financial analysis, to provide the data analysis, to be able to write, to communicate, to share how mission is connected to expenditures, is connected to outcomes in the community. And I completely understand, the focus of the Library Advisory Commission, completely respect thinking that there is an and or here. If there's this, then there's that. And I would argue that we're not in a position of, absolute choice. And also that I think that getting that support is absolutely critical to free up Susan's time, to free up Eric's time, to be able to focus more on the mission of service delivery to the community. And the board does have needs. We are all doing our best up here, but we have questions. We want to make sure that we're making solid, well-reasoned policy decisions, especially as they relate to the budget. We don't want to overextend ourselves. And sometimes we felt like we haven't had enough. And so when our confidence isn't there, then you kind of have that stutter stepping you were just talking about, Susan, which is actually impairing your ability to do the work of the library system to get out in the community. And so I think a really important way to help resolve that cycle is to make sure that you have what you need in-house. And I know you rely on your agreement with the city of Santa Cruz to provide the finance. You have raw inputs, and I'm not exactly sure how that arrangement works, but you still need your team. You need your people inside that have facility with Excel, have facility with projections, analysis data that you can turn to. And when we say, Susan, we like this, you're not saying, oh my goodness, how am I going to do this? like, and I know that feeling. You need to be able to have someone that you can say yes, and who can write the staff reports that we need to be able to make the best decisions we can. So I just wanted to put my mark on this conversation as well, saying that you need it. Now, where I am less sure or forceful is about what that looks like. So I know the proposal here is for a management analyst. I don't know, is that the best? Like, we're presenting the need. And so I think maybe working with the HR department in the city, or thinking about even a temporary consultancy, how do we deliver on that? And I'm totally open to what that looks like. Is it 100,000? Is it more? Is it less? I don't know. So saying like, this is what I need, I think that we need to address in this budget, at least in part. Maybe we can't go all the way, but at least in part. And I will absolutely would want to see that in the budget to provide you and Eric the support you need. Okay, those are my comments. Thank you, Chair Bernal.
Thank you. Go next to Jamie.
Thank you, Martine. I think Tina summarized a lot of the thoughts that I had pretty well there. So I don't know that I have a lot of extra. Well, I mean, I think I just would reiterate the issues that I've seen from our perspective on the board level. The stutter stepping has been really hard and really frustrating. We recognize the fact that not adopting a budget just sort of off the bat is a heavy drain on staff, heavy drain on the board. It's frustrating for everyone involved. So we have to figure out how to get off this conveyor belt and so that the board feels like it has the information it needs. And obviously staff doesn't feel like you just can't get things done. So I'm encouraged that we're developing plans to do that. I think at its highest level, I maybe I kind of want to propose a bit of a philosophy approach for the board in terms of adopting the budget. And we'll see if you guys like it, or if there's maybe some way to massage it. But what I do in Capitola, what I've done every year as city manager, is I'll propose a balanced budget to the city council. You know, I go with a balanced budget, revenues match expenditures every single time. Now, what then I'll also do is look back and say, okay, over the last couple of years, we've accumulated, you know, $1.5 million of fund balance. And then I say, here's your balanced budget. And then during our budget discussions, here's a plan to spend that down to $500,000 fund balance. You know, here's a plan to spend the $1 million. And it really seems to work because everyone can conceptualize, okay, we have a balanced budget, we're doing good. And then we have some extra money. Let's talk about what our plan is. And staff makes a recommendation about the most effective way to plan it. That's not the way this budget is presented. And that, for me at least, and maybe it's just me, if the rest of the board doesn't feel this, it leads to a little bit of hyperventilation for me when I just look and I see this bottom line number that's $1.7 million in the red. And I think, oh God, you know, how does this look in 3 years? Because 3 years ago was like not very long from my perspective. I remember being on this board and, you know, and if we really had a $1.7 million deficit for 3 years, like suddenly we're in crisis mode. So as a philosophy and a way to approach the budget, for me, at least as one board member, what would be really helpful is to like see a balanced budget and then see a plan for the fund balance expenditures, understanding the difference between the two. I know that there's the excess MOE out there, which kind of changes the game a little bit. But maybe that just helps the whole board kind of conceptualize what we're faced with. And if other board members have input or maybe a different take on it, I'd love to hear it. So thank you.
And I do want to respond. I think my difficulty has been the MOE. I really had expected at this point that we would have a dollar amount that was projectable for the next 5 years. And we don't have that. So it shows this deficit. We believe there's $2.3 million there that could go to Santa Cruz Public Libraries. And so if I showed you a balanced budget right now, basically you're looking at the level of hours and services we have currently, because it's not adding back any of the staff. And I could go through that exercise, but that's pretty dramatic. That's pretty dramatic. Because $1.8 million is a lot of staff.
Okay.
Do you see my difficulty? And the projections for the out years, I can't project the MOE because it hasn't been agreed to. We could for 5 years when we had a 5-year agreement. But the only projection I have is for this year.
It seems like that we can do like a 5-year projections once we get that in place, and that process is starting to. So hopefully, this is also an interim kind of arrangement. Here.
Could I make one more comment, Chair Bernal?
Sure.
So I just am responding to Jamie's comments just now. I think for the county, you know, we're in a slightly different scenario in that we're constantly budgeting fund balance to make up for our structural imbalances. So you know, we have a pretty consistent fund balance that rolls forward from year to year. So you know, seeing it displayed this way doesn't give us as much heartache. And I just based on our conversation at the last board meeting, we had, you know, talked about using some of the fund balance in the new budget. So it's not as great of a concern for me, at least in the new fiscal year that is being proposed. I guess in terms of just going out and the projections going forward, if we're going to continue to draw it down to the point where we have no fund balance left, then that is a problem. And I know that ties in with the future of the MOE and what that's going to look like going forward. But at least for this upcoming fiscal year, I think we would be okay with showing use of fund balance as one of our resources in the overall budget. I just wanted to also add a comment that I failed to mention it, but I did want to indicate support for eliminating the fees and fines. I do think we're doing more of that here in terms of eliminating fines and fees, and it would be consistent with our equity goals. So I think what Sarah presented was compelling, and if we can afford to do it within the budget, I think it makes a lot of sense from different, in many different ways. So I think that's great that you propose that and would support adding that to the budget that you bring back in June.
Okay. Jamie?
Yes, one point I would make. So thank you, Nicole, for that information about how the county budgets. I guess, you know, and probably it just comes down to how we interpret our own words. Our motion at the last meeting was to authorize staff to develop budget proposals to strategically reduce the size of the library fund balance to $500K. And so honestly, like in my mind, what I was imagining is okay, here's the plan to reduce fund balance. Like that was going to be kind of a standalone thing. We would see a balanced budget and then we would see that plan next to it. And I'm not saying, I totally understand that plan could have included staffing based on the conversation that we had as a board at the last meeting. So that was my understanding of what we were doing. I recognize the fact that using words like strategically reduce is obviously open to a fair amount of interpretation. And it was just what I had in my head, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's exactly the right answer. And
sorry.
And I was just going to note that, you know, I'm willing to give it a shot on the eliminating the fines. Obviously, I have a couple concerns about it, but it sounds like it's been something that's been successful in so many other places, and they haven't seen incidents where you end up just, you know, losing more product or having more product just late all the time. So thought I'd toss that out there.
In all honesty, Jamie, I was imagining something more like that myself. We didn't get the fund job balance projection till Wednesday night, and we had already done most of our analysis at that point for the board packet, which had to go out on Friday. And so we can do maybe more of that. I didn't anticipate that the fund balance would be that high. I was surprised.
Okay.
I'm just going to also say, in light of the things that we need to accomplish over the next 2 years, I may not recommend spending down to $500,000 in year one, because I still think we have some big things I think physically there's only so much we can accomplish in the next year. And I'm worried about the work plan in front of us. So I probably will still come back in June with a larger fund balance than I'm comfortable with, but I don't want to spend it for spending's sake.
Any other comments or questions from the board? No, I don't really have any much more to add than what's been said. I generally agree with all the comments and things that have been covered today. Today is more of a, I guess, a discussion and hearing on the final budget that'll come back in June. So we're not making any final decisions here. But I think you've gotten some feedback. Tina, you have something else to add?
Yeah, sorry, I had to make a location change, so
Oh.
I've moved. Anyway, yeah, I do have some comments on this in that I think that we do move forward for this year. And I will admit that when I was reading through the budget, I was really missing that long range projection. And I was going to actually ask Martine and ask his finance director to see that, because I think that's very important. I can see that this plan, as we go forward, within 2 years, we're drawing down that fund balance pretty low. We're drawing it down basically, if not to zero, very close. So what about year 3 and year 4? So I'm very interested in that, but I also understand and appreciate you raising the point about the uncertainty with the MOE being a major factor and why that is not accurate. So I think this is such a pivotal year for us. So to harken back to how you started out this item, Susan, saying, I have leases, I have maintenance agreements, we have MOE agreements, we have all of these things that are all intertwined and all have budgetary impacts, and they're all pressing. How am I going to get this done? So I really think this is an important, and then that comes back to analysis. So we're all connected here. So I think more than ever, I would support you pulling in a consultant, pulling in resources to help develop a work plan, prioritize all these work products, and have someone that can project manage and get them through. Because yeah, we also have a couple layers of subcommittees as well. We have the MOE subcommittee and now the hours and temporary position working committee. So I think this will be a very transformative year. And so I think when we hear from you in June, it'd be really great to see a plan for, you know, a 1-year add of analytical support to get through all of these very significant, very important work products and milestones. And then I think when we're looking at next year's budget, we will have that longer range view. And I think that will, and then it will, the complete picture. And I think we'll be able to do a much deeper dive with our budget then. So that's my comments on that. Thank you, Chair Bernal.
All right. Thank you. Any other comments, questions from board members? Okay. I can't recall whether I opened it up to the public previously or not, but are there any comments from the public at this time?
Chair Bernal, there is one public comment. This is from Judy. Comment item 11C. I agree with Mr. Goldstein regarding the frustration with materials that are unavailable when patrons keep materials for extended periods. It also could impact students who have planned a project based on specific materials which are not returned on time. And wouldn't the charges for lost and damaged materials also be a financial burden? That ends the comment, and there are no further public comments.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay. All right, so with that, we can turn it back to board action. The recommendation before us is to accept the proposed Joint Powers 21-22 Joint Powers Authority budget and recommend placing the approval of the final budgets on the June 2021 JPA agenda. So I guess it's really more accepting the draft with, and then incorporating the comments that have been provided today and the feedback provided today, and then bringing back a proposed final budget in June. So is there a motion?
I'll move approval of the recommended action to accept and bring back the budget at our next meeting in June.
All right.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Coburn,
Aye.
Director Goldstein, Director Goldstein.
Aye.
Yes, thank you. Vice Chair Friend,
Aye.
Chair Bernal.
Aye. Okay, that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Moving on to the next item, which is scheduled upcoming meetings, which is on June 3rd at 5 p.m. Virtual meeting. And then after that, we have adjournment. So that we're concluded then. Thank you very much to everyone for your participation and the really good discussion, as well as staff and board members. So have a nice rest of your day.
Thank you.
Take care.